Okay, yes, we're on, we're live. Hello again, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. If you're joining us live, great. If you're watching this on replay, Xcession TV with you once again. Slightly different format for the session today. We're going to be taking a little bit of a different tack where we've given our reviews of solutions, we've spoken to the vendors, but this time we're going to have a bit more of a general discussion about all things enterprise service management. If you haven't tuned into the channel before, just a quick background on us and Xcession. So I'm Daniel Gilby. I'm an account manager with Xcession. Xcession are, and I have a slide actually I can just pop up on screen that talks to this a little bit more. So we're a managed services consulting and implementation partner around all things ITSM and ESM. Won't read out the slide, but just take a moment to glance through that. Check out the website when and if you have time. I'm joined with my colleague, as always, my co-star, co-presenter, Sunil. Sunil, if you'd like to say a few words.
The ant to your deck. Yes, I'm Sunil Dougal, so CRO of Xcession, and over a decade in the ITSM, ESM world, working with customers who are really trying to maximize their investment in these sorts of tool sets.
Fantastic. And I mentioned we're having a broad conversation around enterprise service management. And to that end, I'm very pleased that we've got Paul Kelsall from SCC joining us today. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Paul Kelsall. I'm the head of solutions and propositions for what we call the digital automation practice, which works around service management solutions, and we help our customers in the implementation and purchasing of the right technology.
Fantastic. Sonal, you had a great question to kick off with Paul, I'm sure.
I do. Thank you, Dan. So, Paul, first of all, fantastic to have you with us, just from my point of view. And I think one of the really exciting bits about having someone like yourself join us is that SCC really have taken the ESM concept to lots of customers that we might be able to maybe not name, but talk a little bit about in some of the benefits that they've received. But I guess the first question, Paul, is it feels like ever since I started in the ITSM world, that ESM has just been there behind the door, waiting to make its entrance, but hasn't ever really landed. But now it sort of feels like things are changing a little bit, and that actually ESM is becoming much more of a central focal point for organizations. So I guess, first question really to you is, why do you think that is? I mean, what's kind of happening that's suddenly meant ESM is a much more relevant topic?
I've been in the industry even longer than you, Sunil. So, yes, I mean, the ESM has been sort of kicking around for a long time, and a lot of people have sort of, not even if they haven't used the acronym, have tried to do things like that. And the main issue has been that a lot of the service management that is done in organizations is very much departmentally partitioned. So the IT had their IT service management, HR had their case management, facilities of managing their issues, and all of this became thing. And then customer service came along, and that was doing it as well. And because we, I guess in business, started to get really fixated by process, that we started to create our own processes departmentally. And then we created these little silos of process to handle service across the whole enterprise. But the problem was they were all separate little silos. And the reality of the world is that we don't actually work in silos. It's the whole company working together to provide whatever it is that an organization needs to deliver. And that has always been one of the sort of barriers to the ESM message. And of course, vendors and software providers feed from people's requirements and actually design their systems to be the ITSM system, to be HR's case management system. So they actually created, if you like, a duplication of the departmental silos. What I think has happened was that when business started to release itself from the departmental structure, and actually the ability to work from home, the ability to move and be mobile and actually working from anywhere suddenly broke the department little boxes a little bit. And that made it possible to say, well, we actually don't want to just work with the department. We want to work with a particular skill that may be in a department, and we need to find it. And that could be anywhere. I mean, we're all sitting in our homes, and that demonstrates one of the things that happened. And it became very focused. And recently, I suppose one of the biggest drivers that was, of course, the COVID thing forced so many people out. It suddenly became important to manage the work, not just manage departments. And so I think ESM really did start formulating into something that is more important now, to say, look, how do we make work better and actually deliver what's needed from anywhere? And that flexibility has gone out into the way people buy services from other organizations, the managed services. The old outsourcers of old were very big. We as an SCC are a managed service provider. But what people are asking for is specific services that they can draw in on. And that service concept has become more important now than the process-oriented departmental management that they have.
Yeah.
So I think is why ESM has become more.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I love the fact that we still talk about the pandemic all the time, but actually it's a great example of almost enforcing a digital transformation and the behaviors amongst people and departments within an organization to adopt transformation, digital transformation. You're at home, we're at home, we're using a collaboration tool today. We can't just wander over and talk to each other in the office. And I think, do you think that's opened the eyes then to people that sit at C-suite and go, we've talked about this for a long time, but actually it's been forced on us, and now we can see that it's attainable, that we can actually drive a change in the way our organization works?
Oh, definitely. I mean, SCC supported lots of companies in helping companies, their employees work from home. I mean, from simply supplying laptops instead of having the desktops, but all of the communication, the collaboration tools. And though the pandemic, if you like, was the trigger of a major shift, a forced shift, a lot of organizations saw the benefit. They saw the benefit from just the ability to be more reactive, to be what I call business dynamics can really improve. You can really improve your dynamics if you start managing your work by getting the right skills engaged in doing the job. Those skills can be anywhere. They could be inside the company, outside the company. They could be anywhere on the planet. And what I guess, the pandemic did a lot more is it confirmed to the higher people in business that the technology was capable. Yeah. Now, we'd seen it before. We've been involved in service management, and service management is one of the sort of more dynamic, not the single geographic location of processing, but we saw it before. But it's released it. It's proved and confirmed that the technology is capable. And I think companies have realized also that if you can get collaboration across the business, you remove some of the barriers and what I would call the costs of process. And the cost of processes, especially departmental processes, all departments had an in process. All departments had an out process. But the other department had another in process from the out process that came from their department. So the result was there was a lot of process involved in managing the interchange of of the job between many locations, and then telling everybody that they were doing it or not doing it or whatever, and then people monitoring it, taking on some of the best practices of service management and applying it across the enterprise allows you to manage the work and the flow of the work without actually having to put in place all of these departmental processes and communications. The tool could, if you like, handle the visibility that you used to have when you were sat in a room and could see the people working around you, so you could shout across the office to find out where something was. If they're not in the office or they actually work externally, the tool gives you that capability of still having the vision, the insight of what's going on.
Yeah, so, and I guess, you know, the outcome that you see from this is that, you know, people get a better experience, both internal employees and external customers or internal customers. You know, your ability to change is improved because you can make change happen more quickly. You are more productive and more efficient in terms of the transition of workload from one department or one skills base to another. You know, overall, you sort of see, therefore, benefits to the organization. Why, Paul, do you think it needs a different sort of mindset when you look at ESM tooling as compared to functionally specific tooling? So why can't we just take an ITSM tool and roll it out across the organization?
Well, I think one of the things that a lot of the departmental or niche tools had was, of course, it came with a vocabulary. It had a language around it. You know, in the IT world, it all created this vocabulary that it used. Now, that's a great vocabulary. It was actually one of the ways I was in the days before ITIL, so I sort of know that what it was before, but it gave us the ability to, if you like, communicate in the department more sensibly. You know, is this a problem? Is this an incident? Is this a fault? Is this a ticket? You know, we all had lovely, lovely languages and we could all use the thing. Now, what they meant was dependent on what you meant by it more than anything else. So we got a language that allowed collaboration within the department. Problem being is that language was built around the IT world. HR had their own language. They called things cases or requests or, you know, things, and issues came from the customer service world. So there was a lot of vocabulary. And so, of course, the ability to say, well, let's just take my ITSM system and give it to HR and they can use it. And then people can log incidents against themselves and, oh, I want to change, or, you know, this is not a problem because problems are something else. But it's made it harder for the businesses to move. So a lot of tools that got, I wouldn't say misused, but let's say extended beyond their original design, actually did strain the use of the tool. It also constrained each of the departments to try and create some form of generic service management, which was either inferior to what was needed by one department or too sophisticated for another. You know, the person getting tea, making the tea for the meeting rooms did not want a full incident process with SLAs. You know, it was not that necessary, but that was what the tool had, so that's what you got. So what you really needed in the enterprise service thing is this ability to put in your own definitions, which are departmentally driven, the services you are providing, and the language that you're using within those worlds, but draw them together and allow them to exchange and link. And that's really where the ESM tools are really giving a much better, a more practical way of implementing them, because they can be implemented easier, because you're not changing everyone to pretend to be an IT person, or you're not making the IT people pretend they're a HR person. It's allowing the specialties to still exist, but joining those specialties in a collaborative link. And that way you're, if you like, orchestrating the process across the enterprise and not losing anything. Where I think using the same tool many, many times, which was done a lot, resulted in some people using it as really not much more than a ticketing or recording system. And it really didn't bring any value other than that. What you really want is that everybody gains the power and the insight of their service management application, but they still will link together. And obviously there are lots of reasons why you want a single platform in terms of cost and the cost of maintenance and updates and all of that stuff. So there is always a drive to do it, but now the tools are with us. You know, they give us the ability to still have the flexibility across departmental functionality and not really just having to customize everything to everybody's needs.
Yeah.
So Paul, just harking back to the talk about the pandemic and things, I mean, in your view then, and certainly this is what I feel, is that the fact that there was this radical immediate change in the way everybody had to work all of a sudden driven by that, to me, it felt as though that the old notions of how work had to be done were kind of all of a sudden, like almost broken down. And there was a reinvention of actually, this is how things could be. And, you know, we've talked about the fact that the technology stood up to the test of that and made things available and people could continue working in ways that they were, you know, basically used to. But do you feel then, as a part of that, then people started to actually take a step back and say, oh, actually, you know, this is we need to look at how we provision these services in a slightly different way through the use of technology, and then come up with a functional tool set that can accommodate those on a broader scale?
I think there was I think there was a lot of people, maybe not initially when they just tried to survive, keep working when the original pandemic thing, but as time went on and went through ups and downs and locks and unlocks, the need to look at the way work was done was, I think, done in all the organizations, whether they were doing it using automation or whether they were doing it just in paper terms. It was a need that drove that consideration of, well, we used to do it this way, it doesn't work in this new environment, so let's look at changing it. Tools, I think, evolved or came to head. It's really, they were there, it was just the fact was that they weren't as perceived as needed, but suddenly they became the functionality that came out of the need to move work instead of departmentally but by skill and requirement, is that the tools that sort of came to the head and the ones that we all talked about were all about collaboration, and they were all about data, you know, cloud and tracking and all of those things, which are all the things that, if you like, move and allow people to work no matter where they are. And I think that's what really came out of the evolution, if you like, that was created by this event, which just heightened what was happening in a much slower way. I mean, we've seen the progression of you know, work moving geographically. Mobilization was a big phrase that used to happen, but suddenly this pushed it into, you know, working from home was the norm, not the thing. And I think, you know, that
really accelerated it, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it just made it thing, but it also made people look at what was important in the systems. What we've seen is that people really want to say it's the outcome of what the automation is more important than the process. Suddenly they realize that the process was just the tool of getting something done. It wasn't what needed to be done. And the fact that suddenly the process had to change suddenly became the awkward thing. Oh, I have to keep changing this damn process because it's moving and moving and changing and moving. We're having to do it a different way. And so I think there's been a lot more focus now on tools that are producing the right results. If you like, this is the result I need, let's get the result. How it does it is less important, because it's becoming it's turning it around. I mean, we became rather too process oriented, if you like, which is a terrible thing when you talk about computer systems. Most people talk about computer systems as being very process based, but there is actually a disadvantage of process, because you have to define it, and it creates a rigidity of your operation. And now it's starting to, people are saying we need the dynamics. We need to be able to change. Businesses change. Competitors come in with a new thing very quickly. So we need to react. So let's not have systems which are as rigid and require time to change. So let's look at that. And it just happens that in the IT world, and especially around the service management world, technologies have evolved in that same way. And there are actually tools that are suddenly no-code tools that just produce the result. And that's more important now when you look at it, when you're trying to manage work. It's the result that's important. And what we call in the SCC, the outcome. We always believe that, understand your outcome, because that's what you want. The process is irrelevant. In reality, it's not important. Yes, of course, we all have to know what we have to do something. But the real key is that you want to get the right outcome.
So it's really interesting that, that we're in this inflection point. And I think tooling vendors are also at that inflection point as well, aren't they? And I as within Xcession, we work with a number of different ITSM, ESM tools. I know that SCC does as well. And there are some tools that you see in the marketplace that you feel will struggle with this transition. There are other tools who are newer entrants into the market and have come with the ESM mindset baked into the way in which they have evolved, and the way in which they have been created. And we share one of those tool sets in common. For me, I think we both are we're all on the same page that For Me is one of the sort of newer breed of very ESM centric tools. So I think maybe let's, if we can, spend a little bit of time just sort of talking about, why we think that is so well suited to, this slightly different way of working now. And I know that between, SCC and Xcession, we've implemented For Me in a number of organizations. But maybe, Paul, you've been instrumental in terms of driving the adoption in the SCC organization and in the SCC customer base. Why did you identify For Me as the right vendor, the right partner to work with?
We work with a whole range of different companies from different industries, from local government all the way through to financial services to manufacturing, distribution, retail. So there are lots of different, if you like, they have lots of different outcomes that they need to make. What we saw was that there was an awful lot of the requirements that we were being asked was, though they might have started off with, oh yes, we need to do ITSM and we're going to track our IT and we're going to do our IT, but they had also recognized that service was across their business and they really wanted to have a single platform. And they also recognized that no actual one department works alone. You know, a new hire process may start in HR, but it drives functionality in facilities, in security, in IT. And so these siloed systems of past were creating their own sort of integration mess. And they wanted platforms that actually could draw them together. The problem was that a lot of the platforms that existed in the past either did what we suggested thing, you use the same platform, but you misuse it in 3 places where you use and only use it once properly. Or you had platforms where you basically installed specific focused applications for that particular business area. But that just means you installed multiple applications, which is exactly what you had before. Where a thing like For Me came along was that, and we saw the great value of it, was that the same tool could provide that platform, that capability of supporting integrated processes, but still kept the different skills requirements separate if necessary. So HR can have their services, IT can have their services, facilities can have their services. And this service-centric approach that For Me created, we saw as being quite amazing, how it could be applied actually way farther than you actually think. We actually have an authority who are using the tool not to do any of the ones we've been talking about, but they actually use it to actually manage school transport in a way of verifying that the drivers are the right people with the right skills and they have the right training and everything like that. And they can manage that process so much more efficiently because it's easier for them to see what's going on. It's very dynamic because unfortunately they rotate and churn their drivers, and so they have to have lots of this process has to run many times during the year, so it is easier for them. So that was a service. We found that actually local authorities recognize the term service because they produce lots of services, whether it's a service to record the fact that someone found a pothole on the street, or a light not working, or a tree that needs to be cut down. They're all services. And what you need is to take and accept that, so, you know, capture the request, if you like, and then pass it to the right people. Well, that's service management. And what we're seeing is that lots of companies may have a driver say, I need a new ITSM system, but what they've got is now the vision to think about the fact that service management is a business function across the business, and that you can benefit immensely. You know, we have a college up in Scotland who again started with an IT plan, but actually are looking at using it for student well-being tracking. So keeping track of the students and making sure that they can, you know, that if there's people having difficulty, that they can track and make sure the right services and resources are being allocated to support that student. You know, it's the same tool. You would say it's not even the same process, but having a tool that allows you to put that on and make it available. One of our original implementations, within 2 weeks of finishing the implementation, in fact, the implementation that you yourselves done from Xcession did for them, they implemented their own process. Within 2 weeks of going live of the original, which was an ITSM, they implemented a freedom of information request handling system. So track and process all by themselves. And that's because the tool and the way we implemented the solution is not just simply giving someone a specific solution, we actually give them an environment that allows them to control and use it across all of their businesses. And they can always come back and ask us to do more, but they can do it lots themselves. And that's really the power I think a lot of people are looking for now, is this, if you like, they're not looking for an application. They're looking for a platform that makes it more like, you know, well, I use Excel because I just want to add up a row of columns. That's just a tool. And sometimes having that ability to use these things makes it possible for us to, you know, deliver solutions very simply. And I think, you know, that is what's made for me come out to the fore, is that they approached it not from a process-oriented approach, but more from a service-oriented approach. And they realized that the world is not just an ITSM system. And I think that's the key. I'd like to say it also gives you the ability to do hyper-automation, as our friends in Gartner would call it, which is you're orchestrating. You can use the tool to orchestrate many, many functions all together. And those functions could be human, you know, a different department needs to be told something, but it can also be technology, updating or getting another system in part of the process is that system is updated, or you can use that system to change something, or you trigger a card system that allows you to create cards to do your security passes. This orchestration, this joining things together, takes it to that next level, which is where you're really starting to orchestrate the whole business, and you don't have to start thinking about having to, well, when do I do this and how to do that? You've got one platform of process across.
I mean, a good example of that is again, a joint project that we've just started in the last 6-8 weeks for a very large higher education provider, one of the largest in the world. But in fact, they have taken on a whole range of different domains within their organization, including IT, but also library services and HR. And I think it's 10 or 11 different functional areas within their organization, and are implementing this service-centric approach across those. So in fact, you know, they are, and it's an ambitious project. It's going very well so far, but it is an ambitious project. But actually, they are, you know, taking this concept of the platform and automation across these different functional areas, you know, really quite a long way, aren't they? Rather than doing it sort of organically, actually, this is a big transformation, a big change with a big set of outcomes associated with it.
Yeah, and that's going. They're trying very hard to take it to the full width, which is that, you know, that these different functions can communicate between each other, and they can interact, and you can join your processes. You can trigger one process from another process, and you don't have to have that singular, you know, lots of emails going around the organization, which is where a lot of the companies have organized themselves around the email world. And this allows you to have a much more better visibility. You know where everything is.
Yeah, and what an opportunity for, you know, improvement in the future, because actually on the single platform you have, as you said, Paul, much greater visibility and opportunity to see where inefficiencies lie, across the different silo boundaries, or hopefully not siloed anymore, but the different functional boundaries within the organization, and great platform for change.
Yeah, I mean, the simplest, there are many optimizing methodologies, Six Sigma and all these things, but they all have one fundamental element in them, is that if you can't measure, you can't work out whether you're going to get it
Yeah.
better or not. So having that insight is the real strength, because you can always improve if you know what is happening. And sometimes I've been involved in programs where people have tried to improve things which aren't improvable because they have no measure to say whether it was good or bad. They just, well, we must try and do this better. Waste of time, effort. You couldn't make it much better. You know, you knock off 3 minutes in a year. Well, that was really very helpful. So most importantly is to make sure that you can see where you can improve. And sometimes within an enterprise wide, you find yourself, it becomes blatantly obvious. These are the areas that really will make payback if you improve them.
You've got much greater observability there, haven't you? In that standardized platform. I mean, we've talked about For Me before, and I'm a big fan of the solution. That service-centric viewpoint. It makes absolute sense. I need a laptop there's a tree falling in a road. Arguably, it's two instances, get my teeth in, where somebody needs something to happen. And it's just that translation of then how does that play out to deliver the outcome, right? Here's a laptop in your hand, or here's that tree has been moved to the side of the road. Now the road's clear again. The road needs to be accessible in that example. But ultimately, the steps to achieve those things, having the flexibility to implement those, very, very capable within For Me. I'm just going to give a time check, gentlemen. So we're kind of at the 37-minute marker. Maybe now, obviously there's much more we could talk about in this space, certainly. But Paul, I don't know if you've any kind of closing thoughts you'd like to share, or Sunil, anything kind of like a final wrap-up question, perhaps?
I think for organizations who are listening in, I mean, one of them is that it is often quite common that we find that one particular department is looking at service management and thinking that, they must improve this for themselves. Looking above the parapet and looking across the organization is a very worthwhile thing. You can really, you will probably find that many points in the organization will have service management requirements. And if you put them all together, they will all come out as a much better solution, and it will help you improve that digital transformation message that has been around for years will actually start paying back through ESM.
I would say that 90% of organizations out there, if they're not thinking about an ESM strategy, they know they should be thinking about an ESM strategy. What I would, to all those people thinking in some format or another around ESM, what I would encourage is conversations with people like, Paul or some of the other folks within Xcession who have experience now over a number of years of successful implementation of ESM programs, because as with anything new, you want to work with people that have been there, got some of the war wounds, understand the pitfalls, and and can make that transition. But it is now is the time, because whatever marketplace your organization sits within, the ability for new entrants to come into that space, that the competitive barriers are probably lower than they ever have been before. And you need to be at the top of your game, really. So I would encourage you to come and talk to us. That's my long-winded way of saying, or talk to Paul or myself or Dan. We'd love to help.
And there's the email below if you'd like to reach out. Thank you very much, Paul. It's been really great and very insightful listening to you and speaking with you today. To the audience, thanks very much for joining us. And as we've mentioned, if you'd like to find out more, get in touch. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.